beneficent and the most merciful. I'd like to thank Allah for giving us the opportunity to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Husayn alayhi salatu wasalam. Tonight is the first of Moharram. The pure progeny of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, are only one day away from the land of Karbala. I wonder how happy Bibi Sakina Salamullah Alaiha would be knowing that she can sleep on her father's chest whenever she wants. And whenever she wants water, she can go to Uncle Abbas because she can see his flag high in the sky. With no more further delay, may I please request Ghufran Rizvi to come and recite the Holy Quran. For Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها وألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذب الثمود بتقواها إذا انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العلي العظيم. محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajah. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That was Ghufran Rizvi. May I please request Abis to come and recite the salam. Bar Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajah.
روشن ہے حق پہ تیری صداقت کلام پاک روشن ہے حق پہ تیری صداقت کلام پاک سرنے سے پیتا اور تلاوت کلام پاک سرنے سے پیتا اور تلاوت کلام پاک ہو زندگی یا موت کے دنیا یا دین ہو زندگی یا موت کے دنیا یا دین ہو ہر شعبہ زندگی میں ہے رہبر کلام پاک ہر شعبہ زندگی میں ہے رہبر کلام پاک مجھ کو میرے ماں باپ کو اپنے وسیلے سے مجھ کو میرے ماں باپ کو اپنے وسیلے سے تو بخشوانا روزے قیامت کلام پاک اولاد و اقربا میرے جتنے عزیز ہیں اولاد و اقربا میرے جتنے عزیز ہیں ہر امر ان پہ کرنا تو آسان کلام پاک ہر امر ان پہ کرنا تو آسان کلام پاک علی کا نام زباں پر مدام آتا ہے یہ نام وہ ہے جو مشکل میں کام آتا ہے پکار دے کے ذرا منکر فضیلت بھی مدد کو سکتی ہمارا امام آتا ہے
یا علی اللهم
اللهم
صل
صل
على
على
محمد وعلى
محمد وعلى
محمد
محمد
وعجل
وعجل
فرجهم.
فرجهم.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That was Abis and his siblings. May I please request Maulana Sayyid Bilal Rizvi Qibla to come and recite the majlis. Bar Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat.
اللهم
اللهم صل
صل
على
على
محمد وعلى
محمد
محمد
وعلى
وعجل
محمد
فرجهم.
وعجل فرجهم.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الأول بلا أول كان قبله والآخر بلا آخر يكون بعده الذي عجزت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وقصرت عن نعته أوصاف الواصفين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على
صل على
محمد وعلى
وعلى
محمد
آل
وعجل فرجهم.
وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم.
اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والمعاطر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الرذبية والجود التقوية والنقابة النقوية والهيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الإمام جعفر الصادق: السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صدق مولانا الإمام جعفر الصادق. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل
اللهم
على
صل على
محمد
محمد
وعلى
وعلى
محمد
محمد
وعجل
وعجل
فرجهم.
فرجهم.
نعرة
We went to the
تكبير،
second night.
الله أكبر.
نعرة رسالة،
يا رسول الله.
نعرة حيدري.
يا علي.
We've entered the second night of our discussions, and the topic, it remains Imam al-Husayn Warithul Anbiya, Imam al-Husayn, the inheritor of the prophets. This title, of course, is based upon analyzing the lines of the famous Ziyaratul Waritha. Yesterday, we had an introductory discussion to the month of Muharram. And tonight we have another introductory discussion about the nature of ziyarah. You see, amongst all of the Anbiya, amongst all of the A'immah, Imam al-Husayn is unique in the sense that for every occasion, there is a ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn. That on the night of Qadr, there is a makhsus and a special ziyarah for Imam al-Husayn. On the 15th of Sha'ban, there is a special ziyarah for Imam al-Husayn. On the day of Arafah, there is a special ziyarah for Imam al-Husayn. That the circumstances, they may change, but you find the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, it remains. And one of the secrets behind this diversity of ziyarat in the name of Imam al-Husayn, to the point that no Nabi has this many ziyarat, no Imam has this many ziyarat, is that this is that Imam who was Aba Abdullah. You see, you can take this name as a laqab, you can take it as a kunya, which amongst the Arabs, of course, was a title that when somebody was born, they would give him a title signifying what the name of their child would be. So usually amongst the tradition of the Arabs, whatever your eldest son's name was, you were given that title. So if your eldest son's name is Husayn, you would be called Abul Husayn. And in the same way, we have Amir al-Mu'mineen's title, Abul Hassan, because Imam al-Hassan was his eldest son. But many ulama said no, that when you look at the names of the children of Imam al-Husayn, all of the children of the Imam, their names were Ali. The famous incident is there that when Imam Zainul Abidin goes to the court of Yazid and they bring out the head of Ali Akbar, Yazid asks, who was this? They say, this is Ali, the son of Husayn. Then they bring the head of the 6-month child. He asks, who is this? They say, this is Ali, the son of Husayn. They say to Imam Zainul Abidin, what is your name? He says, I am Ali ibn al-Husayn. Yazid, he says, did your father not know any other name besides Ali? Imam Zainul Abidin says, if my father had 1,000 sons, he would name each of them Ali. So you find amongst the tradition of history is that the eldest son of the Imam, no one has recorded, his name is Abdullah. So this goes to show that this is not just a historical title, but rather it is a literal meaning. And the literal meaning is that Imam al-Husayn is the father of Abdullah. He is the father of the servants of Allah. That wherever anyone is doing the ibadat and the worship of Allah, whether it is in Laylatul Qadr, whether the 15th of Sha'ban, whether it's the day of Arafah, Imam al-Husayn is the spiritual father of that individual. Because a father is the one who gives tarbiyah. A father is one who brings upbringing. That's why when Imam Zainul Abidin in Risalatul Huquq, he speaks about the father in his treatise of rights. He says that when you look at your father, recognize that he is the jar, he is the source, and you are the branch from that tree. So wherever anyone is doing ibadah, you find that ibadah is a branch. Imam al-Husayn is the source of that ibadah. And he, in this manner, is Aba Abdullah. So in ziyarah, we have all of these different ziyarat because Imam al-Husayn is the spiritual father of those who perform the ibadat of Allah. And in the second manner, the discussion comes up is that what does ziyarah mean in the truest sense and what is the importance of ziyarah? Of course, many ulama, they've written about what is the meaning of ziyarah. For example, one opinion and one view is that ziyarah, really what this term means, of course, translated as visitation, is that what ziyarah means is ittihad al-za'iri wal-maz'ur. That ziyarah is the unison of the visitor with the one whom they are visiting. That the one who does a true ziyarah, a hakiki ziyarah, is the one who becomes fana and annihilates himself in the personality of the one who is visiting. You know what I mean by annihilate themselves? You see, when you think of your father correct, and you imagine your father in your mind, you don't just think of an image of your father, but all of the sentiments associated with them come to your mind. You think of his compassion, you think of his effort, you think of his love. Each of these qualities have become annihilated and fani in this image of your father. There is no separation between the two. So in this manner, you find that when one does the ziyarah, he becomes annihilated in the love and the personality of who he is visiting. This is the reality of ziyarah. And you find that ziyarah is an act. That when you read these different ziyarat, whether it is ziyaratul waritha or ziyaratul ashura, you find that there's one reality towards them. Because when we look at the traditions, there are 4 sources of knowledge. The first source is the hadith and narrations. The second source is the Quran, the book of Allah. The third source is du'as and supplication. And the fourth source is ziyarat. You see, each of them has a unique position. When one wants to speak towards Allah, he recites dua and he supplicates. But when you want Allah to speak to you, then you recite the Quran. In the same way, when you want to speak to Ahlul Bayt, you recite ziyarat. And when you want Ahlul Bayt to speak to you, you read their hadith, for that is their kalam. So we have this 4-fold division. But one of the khususiyat of ziyarat and one of the specific and special sides and applications of ziyarat is when the imams, they would speak, they would say, تَقَلَّمَ النَّاسَ عَلَى قَدْرِ أُقُولِهِمْ. that speak to the people at the level of their intellect. That if I over here in this gathering began a discussion on advanced philosophy and advanced mysticism, the discussion, it won't be fruitful because you have to speak at a level of understanding. And this is why when the Imams would have a hadith, the reality of the Imams wasn't known through their hadith. Even though Amir al-Mu'mineen would say it on the minbar and he said, Saluni, Saluni, qabla an tafkiduni, ask me before you lose me, inni a'rafu bi turuq as-sama'i min turuq al-ardi, that I know the path of the heavens better than the path of the earth. Did those people really utilize the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen? You'll have one person say that how much hair is upon my beard. Amir al-Mu'mineen says to him, even if I told you, who is there to count and confirm it? But what I will tell you is that for every hair there is a shaitan. The one who asked the question was Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, the father of Umar bin Sa'ad. He says, for that child in your home will be the killer of my Husayn. So you see, Ahlul Bayt, they have to deal with individuals and they have to limit their speech. But the question is when you have ziyarah, who is addressing whom? An imam is addressing an imam. Over here, the limitations of speech are removed. That's why dua and ziyarat are one of the most profound literatures when it comes to the Turat and the legacy of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So at the first level, we analyze the different types of ziyarat, we analyze the nature of ziyarat, and we analyze what is the truth and the reality of ziyarat. But ziyaratul waritha, which is the subject of these 10 nights, what is the source of ziyaratul waritha? You know, it's stated that there was a companion of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa
Muhammad
ajil
wa
faraj.
Companion, his name was Safwan bin Jamal. Safwan, he says to Imam al-Sadiq that I want a ziyarah that I can recite on every occasion and at every place for your grandfather Husayn. You see, ziyarat are of two types. There is ziyaratul amma and there is ziyaratul makhsusa. There are general ziyarat. Some ziyarat we can recite at any place and it is recommended at every place. For example, the ziyarah known as Aminullah. This famous ziyarah of Imam Ali, it's stated that you can recite at every shrine, at every haram. And then there are ziyarat which are specific for a time, such as the ziyarah on the night of Qadr, the ziyarat of the day of Arafah. We can recite them, but they are specific to a time. But this companion, he wanted a general ziyarah, that on whichever occasion he wanted to remember Imam al-Husayn, he would recite this ziyarah. So Imam al-Sadiq says to him, and he gives him ziyaratul waritha, that famous ziyarah. Imam al-Sadiq within the ziyarah has many lines. He says, Assalamu alayka ya waritha Adama safwatillah. O peace be upon you, O Husayn, the inheritor of Adam. Peace be upon you, O Husayn, ya waritha Nuhin Nabiyullah. And in this manner, he goes through each of the prophets. So in these nights, the structure of this series is that tomorrow I'll have a discussion about mirat and inheritance, because this is a very important question, is that what is Imam al-Husayn inheriting from each of these prophets? And after that, using the Quran and the Hadith, I'll examine each of these prophets and the inheritance of Sayyid al-Shuhada related to each of the 6 prophets mentioned within the ziyarah. And then I will conclude with the discussion of the line, Assalamu alayka ya waritha Amir al-Mu'minina waliyullah. So this will be the structure of the series and we'll go within this manner. But one line which I wanted to analyze tonight is the line which says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, because this line is a line which is found in many different ziyarat. When we say Imam al-Husayn is the father of the servants of Allah, the question comes up is that what is the status of an abd and what is the reality of ubudiyya and servitude? You know, the Quran has a famous ayat in Surah Al-Hijr, which is the 15th chapter. It says, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. That engage in the ibadah and the worship of Allah. It's a command verb. وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ. Engage in the ibadah of Allah until you achieve certainty and yaqeen. Now, some mufassirun, I'm aware, they say that the meaning of yaqeen over here is death, that worship Allah until death. But we can also take it as the literal sense, because this goes to show that kamalul ubudiyah, the perfection of servitude towards Allah, is related to the perfection of certainty. When Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "Lo kushifa liyal ghita ma azdadtu yaqina," that if all the veils were removed from my eyes, it wouldn't increase the certainty of Ali bin Abi Talib. And he says that he's at the maximum level of certainty. This goes to show that Amir al-Mu'mineen is at the maximal level of servitude towards Allah, and that's the essence within this line. So over here, the Quran is saying that worship Allah until you acquire certainty. And this is very important because one of the main goals of life is to acquire the certainty before death. Because you and I, each and every one, will die a natural death. We'll have al-mawtu tabi'i. But the true person is the one who has al-mawtu al-ikhtiyari, a voluntary death. Now, I'm not here to make the discussion complex. In very simple language, the person who is willing to give away his ego and everything to follow the path of Allah is that person who has died voluntarily, meaning he lives within this dunya, he lives within this world, but he does not let the world live within him. You see, the dunya and the blessings within it were created for the believers. Read Surah Ar-Rahman, the chapter of the Quran. It's all about the blessings, and Allah has given these blessings for the mu'mineen. But the shart and the condition is that possess as much as you want, but remember the reality that you were not created for these things. These things, they were created for you. That know your worth. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that the minimum level you should sell yourself is Jannah and heaven. The minimum price for yourself is heaven. Now, Ali ibn Abi Talib says this is the minimum price. He doesn't say that is the maximum price. The maximum price is the ayat from the Quran, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ. That those people who sell their souls in the pleasure of Allah, those are those people that when they worship, as Imam Ali says, they don't worship for paradise. And they don't worship out of a fear of hell. As Amir al-Mu'mineen says, they worship Allah because they found Allah worthy of worship. You know, they said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, that do you prefer to be in a mosque or do you prefer to be in heaven? Imam Ali says, I prefer to be in a masjid. Why do you prefer to be in a masjid? He says, when I am in a mosque, I, in that state, am the one who is pleased with Allah, whereas in heaven, Allah is pleased with me. You see, this is the mindset of Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is why he is al-insanul kamil. And you find Abu Abdullah, he symbolized these realities within his life. You see, many people, they ask the important question, is that if we say that Rasulullah foretold about Karbala, and the Anbiya knew about Karbala, and Janab Zahra knew about Karbala, does this mean that Imam al-Husayn didn't have his free will to go towards Karbala? Could Imam al-Husayn not have gone to Karbala, or was this something which was compulsory upon him? You see, the answer lies in the fact that when we say this is the Mashia of Allah and this is the divine will of Allah, we don't mean that the Imam did not have ikhtiyar. No, the Imam always has ikhtiyar. The Imam always has free will. But what we mean when we say that this was the divine will of Allah is in the way when one moves closer towards Allah, what is required of them, it increases. For you and I, these 5 mandatory salat is wajib. But for Rasulullah, Salatul Layl, the night prayer was wajib. Why was it wajib for Rasulullah and the Imams? It's because the uhda and the responsibility given towards them was much greater. And when their responsibility, it increases, what is asked from them increases. That's why you find when Sayyid al-Shuhada goes towards Karbala, this was an act which was from his responsibilities, which was made mandatory upon him. And in that situation, Imam al-Husayn had free will and he acted in the servitude and the ubudiyah of Allah. That what was the level of the ubudiyah of Allah? When we say Imam al-Husayn is Aba Abdullah, what is the level? You know, if I told you the day you would die, each and every one of you, you would be in anxiety as that day it approaches. Even if that day is 50 years from now and you knew that day, you would still stay and worry because you know about that day. Sayyid al-Shuhada knew about his martyrdom. There is one thing to be martyred without knowing because it's an event which happened suddenly, but to know what would happen and to give your son Ali Akbar, to know what would happen and to give your nephew Qasim. This is another challenge. This is why Sayyid al-Shuhada is Aba Abdullah. And you find it is one of the philosophies of ziyarah when we recite them. And there's a tradition that says the one who does our ziyarah from afar is like the one who does our ziyarah up close. Because the Imam is the one who listens. لا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا. Don't think that those who are killed in the way of Allah are dead, but rather they are alive. And we recite in the Idnu Dukhul, you know, when we enter the shrine and we ask for permission to enter the shrines, we say that you hear our words. وَتَرَوْنَ مَقَامِ, and you see our status. So you find in this essence, when we go, we seek to increase our ubudiyah and servitude when we go towards ziyarah. And that's why it is stated, مَنْ زَارَ الْحُسَيْنَ عَارِفًا بِحَقِّهِ كَمَنْ زَارَ اللَّهَ فَوْقَ عَرْشِهِ. That the one who does the ziyarah of Husayn, recognizing the right of Husayn, is like the one who has done the ziyarah of Allah upon the arsh and the throne. You see, the throne, of course, is not literal, but a throne is the symbolism in Islamic philosophy of the highest level of existence. When one wants to transcend all of the spiritual realms, they go to the ziyarah of Husayn, recognizing the haqq of Husayn. That's why the topic of the irfan and the mysticism of the companions of Karbala is one of the most fascinating topics, because each of these companions, it's phenomenal, their own background. You know, you look at somebody like Habib ibn Madahir. It's stated one day that Habib ibn Madahir, he was looking at the Furat. And as he was looking at the Furat, he says to the narrator that Muawiyah has died. They say, oh Habib, how did you know this? By looking at the Furat, he was able to deduce that reality. What is the status of Habib? You know, it's stated that one day Habib and Maytham al-Tammar were speaking towards each other. Habib says to Maytham, oh Maytham, it's as if I see a man whose hair is thinning, and that man's tongue is cut in the praise of his master Ali bin Abi Talib. Maytham al-Tammar says, oh Habib, it's as if I see an old man who was killed for the grandson of the Prophet. You know, as the people were hearing this strange conversation of predictions, which was ajib and wondrous, they go towards a companion by the name of Rushayd al-Hajari. When they go towards Rushayd, they say, oh Rushayd, that Habib and Maytham, they've lost it. They're speaking in this manner. You find that Rushayd, he says, what Habib didn't mention is that when they carry his head, the man who was carrying it would be given 200 dinar. You see, this is Ahlul Wilaya. Ahlul Wilaya are on the highest level of spirituality. Now I come back to the hadith. Man zara al-Husayn arifan bihaqqihi kaman zara Allah fawqa arshihi. You see, the arsh is the highest reality. When you go to each of our muqaddasat, when you go to each of these places of ziyarah, right? You find each of them has a title. Najaf is called Ashraf, the most honored. Mashhad is called Muqaddas, the sanctified. Qadmain is called Sharifain, the honored. Medina is called Munabbara, the enlightened. Makkah is called Mukarrama, the honored. But you find Karbala is called Mu'alla, the elevated. Within all of the hadith, there are two places which have been called Mu'alla. Either the Arsh of Allah was called Mu'alla or the Karbala of Husayn was called Mu'alla. Now the hadith, it comes, Manzar al-Husayn arifan bihaqqihi ka manzar Allah fawqa arshihi. You see, Husayn is the one that when one recognizes the reality of Husayn and the ziyarah of Husayn, they're left in wonder about the traditions. You know, one tradition will say that for the ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn, you get the reward of 70 Hajj. Another tradition will say 1,000 Hajj. Another tradition would say, no, that for every step, you get the reward of 1 Hajj, 1 Umrah, maqbool, and accepted as you did it with Rasulullah. So you find the question comes up, why the difference in traditions? Is this ikhtilaf? Is this contradiction? One side 70, one side 1 side every footstep? No. These traditions, they allude to the fact that reward and ajr is given according to the ma'rifah of Husayn. The one who recognizes Husayn more, the more recognition he has of who Imam al-Husayn was, the greater the reward of his ziyarah is. You know, people ask, how is this possible? For every step, you get the reward of a Hajj. And you know, it's stated in a famous story that Allam al-Hilli would ask this question. You see, Allam al-Hilli, a few years before he passed away, there were 2 main questions he had. The first question is that, is it true that when one visits Masjid al-Sahla, the famous masjid in Kufa, which will be the administrative quarters of the Imam when he returns, is it true when somebody visits that masjid for 40 Tuesday nights, they would meet Imam al-Zaman, as the traditions say? And the second thing he would wonder is that how is it possible that the hadith, it says that for Aba Abdullah, tears the size of the wing of a mosquito can forgive sins as large as the oceans. Allam al-Hilli would think that the hadith is there, we've accepted it. But how do we understand this hadith? So he says, it was the 40th Tuesday, and I was on the way back from Masjid al-Sahla. As I was on the way back from Masjid al-Sahla, I met a man. That man, he began to speak to me. I began to realize he's a man of knowledge. So I told him my question, that how is this possible? Tears the size of the wings of a mosquito can forgive sins the size of the ocean. The man, he says to him, that there was once a king, and that king, when he went hunting, he got lost. And as he got lost, he wasn't with his servants and his troops. He had nothing to eat, he had nothing to drink. And at that time, he met a lady. When he went to the house of that lady, she had 1 animal. She sacrificed that 1 animal for the king just to feed him. It's stated when that king, he was leaving, he says to them, if you're ever in need, come and find me. Many years they pass by, that family, they go towards the king. The king, he says, are you the same people who helped me at that time and now you're in need? He looks towards his wuzara, towards those people who give him advice. He says that, what should I give towards them? One of them says, give them a pile of gold. Another says, no, give him this and give them that. The king says, all of you are unjust. They gave away everything they had to feed me. They didn't give half, they gave away everything. The only just thing is that I give away my entire kingdom towards them. The Imam, he says, oh Allam al-Hilli, if a regular king can give away everything he had for the sacrifice of 1 animal, can the King of Kings not give away everything? Can Allah not give away everything for the sacrifice of Husayn?
MashaAllah,
Allama
subhanallah.
Hilli, he recognized that that man was the Imam of the time, and you find that is where the conversation it stops. You see, when the hadith it says this isn't a free license to sin, because the one who is a true abd of Allah, his true goal isn't just paradise. His true goal is proximity with Muhammad and Ali Muhammad in paradise. That's why Imam Ali says there is something in heaven better than heaven. And that thing in heaven better than heaven is proximity to the Javar and the neighborhood of Ahlul Bayt over there. So the true abd is the one who is trying to actualize his potential. But out of the greatness of the sacrifice of Husayn, you find a person is able to be elevated spiritually. And that is why Ayatollah Bahjat would say that if you want irfan and spirituality, either it is found in the haram of Husayn or it is found in the majlis of Husayn.
Subhanallah,
And we
subhanallah.
entered upon this day on the second night of Muharram. It's stated within the traditions, the second of Muharram is when the caravan of Ahlul Bayt arrived within the land of Karbala. It's stated within the hadith that Imam al-Husayn, as he approaches the land of Karbala, his horse does not move forward. The Imam 7 times he changes his horse, and each of those 7 times it doesn't move past this land. He says that this is the land which my grandfather promised that I would be martyred in. He sees a local from that land. He says, Masmu hadihil ard, that what is the name of this land? The person says this land is called Nainawa. The Imam says, Alaha ismun akhar, that does it have another name? He says it's called Shati ul Furat. The Imam says, no, does it have another name? He says it is called the Ghadariya. He says, no, does it have another name? He says, yes, there is one name. It is called Karbun wa Bala, the land of trials and tribulations. Sayyid al-Shuhada says, this is that land which I've been promised. You find Sayyida Zainab, she comes to the Imam. She says, oh my master, ever since we came to this land, I hear the voice of somebody crying. Imam al-Husayn says, oh Zainab, do you not recognize the cries of our mother Fatima, O Zainab? This is the land of Karbala. You know, it's stated that Sayyid al-Shuhada from the local tribe of Banu Asad, he buys the land of Karbala. He says, I bought this land from you, but I'll return it towards you under some conditions. The first condition is that when we are martyred, our bodies will be laying there, bury us within the ground. The second condition is when my visitor comes for 3 days, serve them. Then Imam al-Husayn, he tells the men of Banu Asad, go inside and call your women. When the women of Banu Asad come, the Imam says, O women of Banu Asad, I am the son of Fatima. If your men don't bury our bodies, that when you are getting water from the Furat, bury our bodies. But no, the next line, it breaks the heart. The Imam says, now go and call the children of your tribe. When the children of Banu Asad came, the Imam said, O children of Banu Asad, as you're playing upon this land, put dust upon our bodies if they don't bury us. I say when they entered the land over here, but no, a time it came on the 13th of Muharram, when Banu Asad, they went towards it. The women of Banu Asad saw the bodies of the Shuhada. They said to the men of Banu Asad that you sit inside as the body of the son of Fatima is outside. They say, no, we fear what Ibn Ziyad would do towards us. The women said, no, we'll bury the bodies then. But the men said, no, at this moment we will bury them. As they're looking at the bodies, they see that from the direction of Kufa, a man, he goes in between the bodies. As he goes in between the bodies, he falls upon a body. He says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. It was Imam Zainul Abidin. Imam Zainul Abidin, he says to Banu Asad, O Banu Asad, I'll tell you how to bury the bodies. Make one grave for the martyrs over there. Even in Karbala today, there's one grave for the martyrs. Then he says, make one grave for Habib ibn Madahir. Then they said, oh Khaydi, oh captive, there is a body by the Furat. When we pick one side of the body, the other side it falls down. When we pick the other side of the body, the other part it breaks. The Imam says, that is the body of my uncle Abbas. I will bury the body. Imam Zainul Abidin with his hands buried above Fadil Abbas. Then he says, oh Banu Asad, step back, for only a ma'soom can bury a ma'soom. He places his Abba on the land of Karbala. As he places his Abba, he begins to collect the pieces of the body of his father. He says, Ya Rasulallah, Ya Jadda adrikni. He says, oh my grandfather Rasulallah, help me. He buries his father. On their grave he writes, Hada qabru Abi Abdullah, alladhi qutila ghariba wa adshana. That this is the grave of Aba Abdullah, the one who was killed alone, the one who was killed thirsty in the land of Karbala. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. We ask Allah, through the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are sick and ailing, help them. It's stated within the traditions that when sorrow comes towards the heart and tears they begin to fall, ask for dua. Over there in Melbourne, you're approaching the time of Maghrib, which is a blessed time for dua. And I'm approaching the time of Fajr, which is a blessed time for dua. We say through the rights of Ahlul Bayt that wherever any of the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in dire need, that Allah grant them their hajat if it's within your wisdom to grant it towards them. We pray for the intercession of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, and we pray to be raised with Muhammad and Ali Muhammad upon the day of judgment. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. May I please request Ammar to come and recite the Noha for Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد
وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم.
Abbas na lote, Abbas na lote, मक़तल की ज़मीं बा गई, अब्बास न लोटे, शे आ गए, माइश्क आ गए, अब्बास न लोटे, शे आ गए, माइश्क आ गए, अब्बास न लोटे, मक़तल की ज़मीं बा गई, अब्बास न लोटे, शे आ गए, माइश्क आ गए, अब्बास न लोटे, इस शान इस मक़तल को सिदा रात आलमदार, इस शान इस मक़तल को सितारात आलमदार, आदा की नज़र का गई, अब्बास न लोटे, शे आ गए, माइश्क आ गए, अब्बास न लोटे, शे आ गए, माइश्क आ गए, अब्बास न लोटे, बहता हुआ कानों से लहू सूखे हुए लब, बहता हुआ कानों से लहू सूखे हुए लब, दिखलाने सकीना गई, अब्बास न लोटे, शे आ गए, माइश्क आ गए, عباس نہ لوٹے آگے معاش کا گئے عباس نہ لوٹے دیتی رہی آواز پہ آواز سکینہ دیتی رہی آواز پہ آواز سکینہ آخر کو قضا گئی عباس نہ لوٹے آگے معاش کا گئے عباس نہ لوٹے آگے معاش کا گئے عباس نہ لوٹے کیا جانیے کیوں روٹ گئے کہتی تھی زینب کیا جانیے کیوں روٹ گئے کہتی تھی زینب رخصت کی گھڑی آ گئی عباس نہ لوٹے آگے معاش کا گئے عباس نہ لوٹے آگے معاش کا گئے عباس نہ لوٹے پانی کے لیے معاش کو علم لے کے گئے تھے پانی کے لیے معاش کو علم لے کے گئے تھے دن ڈل گیا رات گئی عباس نہ لوٹے آگے معاش کا گئے عباس نہ لوٹے عباس نہ لوٹے عباس نہ لوٹے صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد
محمد وآل
وعلى
محمد
محمد
ما شاء الله
That was a lot,
ما
mashallah.
شاء الله ما شاء الله
Can Ghufran please come and recite the ziyarat?
اللهم صل على
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل
السلام عليك يا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد المسيحين السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء السلام عليك يا شمس الثمود السلام عليك أنيس النفوس السلام عليك يا مدفون بالجدوس راج بالقدر والقضاء علي بن موسى رضا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان ألمان 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 من فتنة الزمان السلام عليك شريك القرآن السلام عليك خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان أجل الله تعالى فرجك وجعل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهولك ورحمة الله وبركاته
اللهم صل
على محمد
وآل
وعلى
محمد
محمد وعجل فرجه
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
دعا سلامتی امام زمانہ
بسم الله
الله الرحمن
الرحيم اللهم كل وليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا محافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه وأرضك تهوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. محمد وآل محمد السلام.
اللهم صل على محمد
محمد وآل محمد
محمد
وعجل فرجه.
وعجل فرجه.
ما شاء الله. جزاك الله.
جزاك الله جزاك الله.